Whenever it comes to buying an inverter battery for home, the first question people ask is how many VA inverter they should buy and how many ampere hours battery they should choose. And even on YouTube, many people have made videos on this topic. Most of them simply pick a formula from ChatGPT or from some website on the internet and give it to you. And mostly, the formula used for calculating VA and ampere hours is exactly the same everywhere. It is mostly copied and pasted from one another. But all these formulas that are used to calculate VA and ampere hours do not work properly in real life because every company offers inverters with different ratings and every inverter has a different efficiency level. I will explain this later with examples, then you will understand it more clearly. If you take a battery from any company, then even in the same company, you will find one premium category battery, one mid-range battery and one affordable battery. All three may have the same 150 capacity, but their prices are very different. So how is it possible that a cheap 150 hour battery will give the same backup and life as an expensive 150 hour battery? That is why these formulas do not work in such a simple way. We have tested many inverters and batteries ourselves, and whenever we applied these formulas, the results were completely different. For example, when calculating VA, the common formula says that if you have a 1000 VA inverter and its power factor is 0.8, then it can run up to 800 watts load. So if you want to run an 800 watt load, then a 1000 VA inverter should be enough. Or sometimes people even recommend taking 25% extra margin and say you should buy a 1200 VA inverter for that load. But in actual use, it does not work like that. Most inverters available in the market are not efficient enough to be measured properly on 0.8 power factor. Some brands do offer very high efficiency inverters, but their prices are also much higher. Let me explain with examples. We have tested the UTL 3400 inverter and also tested the 3024 model from Asha Power. Both are sold as 3 kVA inverters, but the Asha Power model costs around 40,000 rupees, while the UTL 3400 costs only around 18 to 20,000 rupees. During load testing, the Asha Power inverter was able to handle a full load of around 2400 watts. That means it was actually performing according to 3 kVA and 0.8 power factor. But the UTL Gamma 3400 model could only handle around 2 kilowatts load. So if you buy the UTL Gamma 3400 inverter by applying the 0.8 power factor formula, then your load may not run properly. That is why it is also important to see which company inverter you are buying and in what price range it comes. Similarly, if you go with transformerless technology, then the same inverter can handle much higher load because transformerless technology gives you an almost 1 power factor. That means if you have a 5 kVA inverter, then it can handle a full 5 kilowatt load. So if you want to calculate VA and you are planning to buy normal company inverters, then whatever formula you use, always keep at least 50% margin. For example, if you want to run a 500 watt load, then you should use a 1 kVA inverter. Only then you will be able to run that 500 watt load comfortably. In the same way, if you want to run a 1 kilowatt load, then you will need a 2 kVA inverter. We have tested the UTL 1650 inverter, which is a 1400 VA inverter, but in actual use, it runs around a 900 watts load only. According to formulas, a 1400 VA inverter should handle more than 1100 watts load, but in reality, it handles only around 1 kilowatt load. That is why whenever you buy an inverter, you should count almost double VA capacity compared to your watt requirement. Only then your load will run properly. Similarly, if you want to run a 3 kilowatt load, then in the market you usually need a 5 kVA inverter. A 5 kVA inverter is officially said to handle around 4 kilowatts load, but most company inverters can only handle around 3500 watts. Again, we tested the 6048 model from Asha Power and it could handle more than 4000 watts load because it comes with higher actual capacity. First of all, calculate your total load properly, and you should not calculate load just by guessing from appliance labels. Do not simply assume that your fan is 70 watts or your room heater is 2 kilowatts. Actual power consumption is usually lower. For example, we tested a 2 kilowatt room heater and in actual use it was consuming only around 1600 watts. And if we talk about other appliances like ceiling fans, then a normal AC fan consumes 70 watts only when running at full speed. And if it is a BLDC fan, then it consumes around 30 watts only. So if you want accurate calculation, there is a very simple method. You can either use a multimeter and calculate power by multiplying voltage and current, or you can use digital meters that are now available in the market. We have also made a detailed video about them where we explain how you can make a digital meter and check the power consumption of any appliance in your home. When you measure actual power consumption, then you get a much clearer idea about how many watts the appliance really uses. So first calculate the watts, then whatever total load you want to run, count almost double capacity in VA. Like I explained earlier, for a 500 watt load, you should use a 1 kVA inverter. But as the inverter capacity increases, you can reduce the extra margin slightly. For example, if you want to run a 10 kilowatt load, then you can run it on around a 15 kVA inverter. You do not necessarily need a 20 kVA inverter for that. But if you want a future-proof inverter, then you can choose 20 kVA. And if you go with transformer-less technology, then even a 12 kilowatt inverter can run a 10 kilowatt load. In fact, on a 12 kilowatt hybrid inverter, you can easily run around 11.5 kilowatts continuous load. We have also tested this practically. Now let us talk about batteries. The biggest problem with lead-acid batteries is that as the load increases, the battery backup decreases. On average, a 150 HR battery can give around 0.8 unit to 1 unit backup. If you use a premium battery, then you may get around 1 full unit. But if you use a budget-friendly or mid-range battery, then you may get only 0.6 to 0.8 unit. That means you can run a 300 watt load for around 3 hours on a good 150 hour battery. But as soon as your load reaches 500 watts or more, then your backup becomes almost half. We have also made a detailed practical video on this topic, which you can watch on our channel. But personally, I do not recommend lead-acid batteries anymore for loads above 500 watts. You should move towards lithium batteries. In the market, you can now get lithium batteries for around 17 to 18,000 rupees. They require almost no maintenance, their life is much better, and even if you run a 300 watt load, you get the same backup. Even if you run a 500 watt load, you still get almost the same backup. So hopefully now you can understand how to calculate what VA inverter you need and how much battery you should choose. And if you still want to use formulas, then simply tell ChatGPT your load and the battery backup time you need. It will give you an idea about what inverter, VA and battery you should choose. And if you tell us your load and required backup time, then we can also suggest the right inverter and battery for you. That is all for today's video. Thank you.